Chapter 9. The Final Lesson. Believe in yourself. Last time on Dojo at Football State, Damien and Marcus were having a bit of a quarrel when they went to go pick up Robert, Master Tea Practitioner, and his student and translator, Bruno. Bruno was enthusiastic and showed clear love of tea and camaraderie. However, no one could get a read on Robert, who was stoic, silent, with a chachi that seemed almost undetectable. During the second day of events, Damien and Marcus intercepted ants that were infused with chachi and attempting to get into the back office. They fought and learned that these ants were summoned by leftovers left to rot in the back office. Marcus channeled his ability and managed to get rid of the food, but still felt like his skills were inadequate compared to others. As everyone left for dinner, he stayed behind to clean up, only to discover that Bruno was in the dojo waiting for him. Marcus stood barely out of the doorway between the Chanayu room and the tea dojo. Bruno, the mysterious translator and assistant of Robert, sat in a chair waiting for him, engulfed in chachi. Marcus could hardly think of anything to say as he saw him there. It must have been close to an hour since everyone had left for dinner. "Has he been waiting for me here this whole time?" Marcus asked himself. As if to answer that question on his own, Bruno responded. "My spectacles chachi allows me to read the profile of people's tea energy," he said. "This is my signature chachi, the one that first revealed itself to me, long before I studied under Robert. Now, let me ask you something. Do you think this is a very powerful ability?" Marcus paused. "No, but you've clearly gained access to abilities way stronger than that. Your skill in channeling your chachi has let you learn other types from people that make you stronger, like the knife conjuring ability you used on Damien." Bruno shook his head. "While it's true you can learn the styles of chachi of other people, and even incorporate them into your own brewing, your own signature chachi will always be your greatest ability. You know, I think words are a poor teacher. Let me show you." He threw a gaiwan in front of Marcus and then put one in front of himself. He gave them both a red tea and kettle and began brewing. Marcus watched as this seasoned practitioner, skill far beyond what he had ever seen even in the most talented of Abby, Rick, and Jack, faced him. He had no idea what to do but just to start brewing himself. They exchanged teas when they were done. Marcus's tasted good. It would have been technically near perfect in terms of what he needed for the exam. Bruno's tea, however, was absolutely delightful. It was mouth-watering from the first sip, the way the sweet flavor balanced against the almost tannic notes of a red wine. Marcus had no idea how he brought it out, but there was almost a piney flavor to this tea. The aroma and taste were so intoxicating that Marcus was almost completely drawn in, and had to jump back to reality when he saw Bruno surging and preparing to actually attack him. His teacher conjured a ball of golden light composed entirely of chachi in his hand. It looked almost like a kind of energy blast from a sci-fi or anime. Bruno smiled. "This was a technique from one of my former fellow students. He called it light chachi." Without much warning, Bruno launched the ball of pure tea energy right at Marcus. Marcus activated his shield chachi. He protected himself against the burning light, but the force of the attack was immense. He skid backwards as it pushed him, and by the time it burst against the shield, he was knocked onto his back onto the tatami in the room behind him. Marcus staggered back up to his feet and to the tea set, understanding that this was just round one. "You should consider yourself quite talented just to be able to survive an attack like that. I only held back slightly," he said. "This is the power of my spectacles, chachi. I can see you and know you exactly as you are, and because of that, I know you don't just want to defend. So this time, try attacking." Marcus nodded. The two went to pour boiling water over their leaves again. Marcus shook as he felt the tea and searched for the peak with his hand. He was unable to tell if he was excited, afraid, or just blatantly overwhelmed from this sudden situation. Bruno, for his part, hardly even paid attention to his gaiwan, as if years of experience just let him know when it would be ready. Instead, he just smiled at Marcus, studying him carefully with those enchanted spectral spectacles of his. The two decanted their brews and went to clash again. Bruno conjured another ball of light into his hand. He launched it at Marcus once again, holding nothing back. Marcus raised his fists, a set of two mirrored astral copies appearing right in front of him. "Astral Fist Chachi!" He launched a volley of blows straight at the bright tea energy in front of him, but it seemed to only slow it down, if anything. The attack seemed to be still moving full steam right for Marcus's face. In a last-second reaction, Marcus let the ethereal hands disappear. He channeled every last bit of chachi that he had straight into his face, trying to particularly strengthen one part of his body like he had when he faced the ants. The radiant blast exploded. Marcus remained mostly unharmed, but again was knocked to the ground as he felt the force hit him. He staggered back up again. He looked discouraged but determined. Bruno continued grinning as he did this. "You're almost there, Marcus," he said. You see now how telling your own story is so much stronger than telling the story of someone else. Show me your shachi, Marcus. Tell the story you wish to tell me about yourself. My story, Marcus thought. What does he mean? Once again, as if he could read Marcus's thoughts right off his chachi, Bruno spoke again. You resent having a power that only lets you protect yourself, Bruno said. This is foolish, because to protect others, you must protect yourself. As such, to have others believe in you, what must you do? Bruno started to decant his tea. Marcus did the same. Marcus's eyes widened. He had an idea. It seemed crazy. It felt like the type of idea that Damien would have. That made him smile. He almost wished Damien was here so he could tell him what it was before he went ahead and did it. However, as the third bright sphere of chachi hurtled towards him, he knew there was no time to doubt himself. Marcus drank his tea. The power of his chachi surged around him. He channeled it all directly into his fist, his real one, not any astral projection. As the attack made its way towards him, he shielded only his hand. He swung back, and right as the ball was about to land, he struck out at it. The force of his shielded hand meeting the light made a clink as it connected. Marcus pushed with all of his might, and in this half-second-long exchange that felt like a minute, he smiled. The projectile was launched right back at Bruno without bursting. Bruno beamed with pride as he raised his arms in front of his face and was knocked backwards by the attack. I did it, Marcus said. I defended myself. I fought back. Bruno stepped back towards the table, eyes filled with excitement and hunger. Yes, yes. All tea is worth having. All stories are worth telling. Now let's see how you handle this plot twist. The two clashed in one last final brew. Marcus looked on in awe as Bruno seemed to radiate with more chachi than he had ever seen before. He set his worries aside. Instead, he focused in on not what others could do, but what he could do for himself. He poured his last brew, and the two exchanged cups. The tea, even after 3 preceding brews, still seemed to have all the vibrancy and flavor, perhaps even more. Bruno was done warming up. It was like these past 3 rounds were a preheat for his own body, and this was his own tea leaves unfurling. He raised his hands into the air, and before him emanated several large balls of light energy. He smiled widely and excitedly. Marcus seemed to flinch. There was no way he was going to be able to deflect all of these at once. The spheres started to fly in his direction, each taking a different path to hit him in a different spot. Marcus raised his arms to his face and waited. He left himself open to the attack until the very last second, when he flashed with bright hot chachi, engulfing his entire body with maximum intensity. The charge was in sync with the collision, and the projectiles all burst into dazzling blasts of radiation. When the dust settled, Marcus was still there, heaving and trembling, but still smiling. He looked over towards Bruno. Bruno's spectacles made of Tiora had transitioned to sunglasses right before the burst of light. Marcus chuckled a little. Bruno clapped his hands together. Excellent, he said. I haven't had that much fun in a long time. It was really something, Marcus said, unable to stop grinning. Well, I can see the Tea Dojo's standard is as high as ever. Come on, we've worked up quite an appetite. Let's join the others for dinner. They strolled through the campus of Football State, down to the alehouse where everyone had already begun eating. Rick and Jack were at one end of the long table. Rick had been using Jack to translate various questions over to T. Robert, which all got brief responses. Damien, Abby, and the rest of their lineage was sitting at the end of the table closest to the bar. Every couple of tables had a gaiwan or teapot going, with some tea in it. Bruno suddenly got a mischievous smirk on his face, and slunk off for a moment. Marcus sat down across the table from Damien, next to Danielle, but he did not even seem to mind today. You sure took your sweet time getting here, Damien said. And what are you so happy about? It's nothing, Marcus said. I just feel like this event is helping me learn a whole lot. Damien threw his hands behind his head. Well, that makes one of us, at least. They were suddenly ambushed from behind by a Bruno with a tray full of shot glasses. He slung them out to several spots around the table. Come on, let's make this a real party, he said. Oh, Bruno, thank you, but I really shouldn't. You see, Before Damien could finish saying anything, Bruno quickly grabbed his face, opened his jaw, and threw a shot of rum right down his gullet. It burned Damien's throat quite a bit on the way down, and he coughed, not used to something like that. Jack, Abby, and Rick all clocked this and put their hands cautiously on the table as they leaned in towards Damien. The room went silent for a moment. It was just one shot, right? Abby said. That shouldn't be enough to bring him out. Bruno looked cluelessly around the room. He wanted to ease the tension, so he brought out a lighter. He lit his own shot glass, and it was so high alcohol that it caught on fire as well. He threw it back and chuckled to himself as he did so. Flaming shots, Bruno said. Huh? Abby watched as Damien's head slumped over. She lunged for the Gaiwan on the table, but Jin burst through in his red spectral form and beat her to it. His connection to Damien seemed almost weaker than ever. Where last time he was like a shadow behind him, now there were hardly visible red strings that only seemed to tie him to being a vague proximity from his vessel. Rick lunged to grab his Gaiwan and run across the table towards Jin and Damien, throwing a shot back in the process. Yards! The buff spectral benign T-demon appeared behind Rick as he continued charging. Jin just smiled. Not so fast! He decanted the tea from his Gaiwan directly into his mouth. He surged with a crimson-red energy and threw his hands out before the charging duo. Suddenly, they were stopped and trapped inside a blood-tinted glass orb that rose up to the ceiling. Rick swung his fists at it, and Yards tried to change its shape, but their Chachi only seemed to get siphoned from it. Spirit Cage Chachi, Jin said. Nice technique. Hope you don't mind if I borrow it. Jin felt a couple taps on his back. He turned to see Abby, who had launched a volley of astral fists at him that seemed to do nothing. She growled. Jin let out an evil smile. He went back to the Gaiwan to start brewing again. He staggered as a nearby tray of forks flew in his direction. He dodged an ethereal ball that seemed to fly like a chunk of metal. A couple hand-drawn bullets came slinging in his direction. Nearby vases seemed to try to shatter right into him. He had to jump backwards as Catherine suddenly appeared in his midst to attack him. He found himself pushed all the way back to the other end of the table. Annoying brats, he muttered to himself. He turned around to see T. Robert sitting at the table. The man seemed almost unfazed by anything that was happening. Jin waved his hand in front of the man's face briefly, then chuckled. He picked up the thermos full of tea and took a quick swig before setting it back down. Hope you don't mind if I try some, he said. Then he turned back to the others. Spirit Cage isn't the only technique I've stolen, by the way. The group shuddered a bit as they got ready for him to launch another attack. Marcus stood up confidently on the table and walked towards him. He drank a cup of tea and raised his Chachi shield all over his body. Come on, he said. Show me what you can do. I'm not scared of you. Jin smirked. It's not me you should be scared of, boy. Damien, would you be a dear and take care of your friends for me? Jack's eyes widened as he immediately recognized the form of his suggestion Chachi being used. Damien rose up like a zombie. He took a swig of his concealed thermos and then lunged towards Taylor and Natalie. His assault was intercepted by Andrew, who, using his hospitality glove Chachi, quickly pushed him back. This moment of distraction was enough time for Jin to get a hold of a loose teapot and brew. Transmutation Chachi! The table they were fighting on, and all the chairs next to it, began to sink as the ground below turned into quicksand. Andrew leapt from the table and grabbed Natalie and Taylor, who got caught in it, and barely managed to hold on to them with his gloves while standing on the outside of the sinkhole. Danielle, with all of her mental might, managed to tear down a pillar of the building and knock it into another one. She lifted herself and Marcus up onto it, to avoid sinking below. Tanner quickly drew a large life raft above the sinking sand. Abby and Gary jumped into it. Catherine slid across the table to grab Jack's hand and teleport him into the raft as well. Jin chuckled. Look at all the miscreants, Damien. Have your friends always been such roaches? Damien still stood next to him, head slumped over as his body seemed to move to Jin's accord. The two were unaffected by Jin's quicksand. They had left several of the tea-wares near the two, only having a Gaiwan and teapot split between the two safe areas they occupied. Jin collected the remaining wares from the sands below him. No matter. The tides have turned for me now, and I will wipe the rest of the dojo off the map and assume my rightful place as the strongest tea practitioner ever. There was a knock on a nearby table. Bruno had grabbed T. Robert and took him over to stand on a table outside of the quicksand. He dangled a bag of oolong in his hand and a Gaiwan in the other. That was some show you put on, he said. Though I feel as if I must clean up the mess that I made. T. Robert taught me better than to cause such chaos for nice people. Jin sighed. He shook his head. Please, I'll get to you when I get to you, he said. You're impressive. I can tell from your Chachi. You might even be stronger than me. However, this scheme you're pulling, it's the type of thing that only naive college students like these could ever fall for. Scheme? I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, shut your trap, Jin said. It's a cheap trick. Look at me! I'm so powerful! That's because I was trained by this even more powerful tea master! You're not worthy to see his power yet, but trust me, he's so much stronger than I am. What a sham! Marcus turned to Abby and Jack. What's he talking about? Come on, kid, Jin said. Even Damien was getting close to catching on. T. Robert's a fraud. Bruno's the real tea master. He ferries around this demented old man with him everywhere. The poor senile fool can't even see Chachi. Bruno slammed his fist into the table. How dare you! I will show you to respect my... He stopped suddenly. Everyone looked to see T. Robert grab him by the arm. Bruno looked back in shock at the man, who just nodded his head. Bruno bowed and stepped backwards. T. Robert rifled through his things, pulling out some oolong, a gongdao bei, and a spoon. He then gestured towards the tea demon, beckoning him with a finger. Jin could barely contain his laughter. "So you can see me, old man," he said. "I don't know if you know how Gong Fu Cha works, though. You're supposed to use a teapot or a gaiwan. That thing there is actually a serving pitcher." T. Robert preheated his gongdao bei and gave it a moment before pouring it out. Jin beckoned Damien over with him and preheated a purple Xisha teapot. Everyone seemed to look in confusion at the scene before them, except for Rick in the spirit cage above. He seemed to know exactly what was going on. Marcus, glancing his way, muttered something under his breath. "The best tea, with the wares you have, for the people you're brewing for." He said the words with a kind of renewed understanding of their meaning. Danielle was the only one who could hear him, and she still stared in anticipation. The two combatants emptied their water and put their tea leaves into the brewing vessels. As Jin started to brew, he called upon his own deep ancient chachi, as well as Damien's, Rick's, and Yard's. T. Robert gave him a moment to start, then gently poured into one corner of the pitcher, almost as if to try to reduce the random motion of the leaves as he did. Something immediately fell off as the two clashed. Jin flared with a powerful and frightening amount of demonic chachi as he started to brew. There was no visible sign of tea aura around T. Robert. The air felt different, though. Everyone looked around. Light seemed to ever so slightly flicker, and water seemed to jostle in its containers. But there was no way to tell if that was just the reverberating effects of Jin's energy. Marcus was the only one to begin to catch on as to what was happening. He was watching Damien's neck hair. It was hard to see at this distance, but it ever so slightly alternated between standing and at rest. It was like a silent current. A massive riptide was starting to occur. Jin stayed laser-focused on his brew, feeling the energy as it reached its crest. Then, T. Robert did something most peculiar, that no one had ever seen anyone do before. He took his spoon and plunged it into the gongdao bei. He wafted it back and forth, almost seeming to rock the leaves. Jin's eyebrows raised at this. He wanted to mock it, but he started to feel something in his stomach. As the old man massaged the tea leaves, things started to change. Starting from where he stood, the world slowly started to lose color. Everyone started to see a blotch of grayscale around him, then quickly creeping out until everything they could see was in black and white. Jin trembled, being the first to truly understand the magnitude of what this meant. He tried to focus solely on brewing. Marcus broke the silence. It wasn't that he had no chachi, he said. His energy was so vast that the entire world was already engulfed in it. Abby and Jack nodded. After a few moments, Jin decanted and T. Robert poured his tea out into 3 cups. He slid the 2 over towards Damien and Jin. Jin slid one back over to him. Jin quickly threw back his own tea, clapped his hands together, and screamed, "Transmutation chachi!" His intention was to turn T. Robert, the man himself, completely into dust. However, before his energy could reach that far, T. Robert drank his cup of tea and seemed to vanish into nothingness. Jin swung his head around madly, expecting this to be like Catherine's teleportation chachi, and to get ambushed out of nowhere. But nothing happened. After a moment, he felt his arm reach down against his will. Compelled by the rules of this ceremony, he raised the cup to his mouth. Damien did the same. The tea was an effervescent splendor. It had the savory roasted flavors of an oolong, with an almost smokiness to it. However, there was also the sweet undercurrent of caramelized nuts underneath it. The aftertaste danced on the tongue, giving notes of spices like cardamom and cinnamon. It shook Damien back to his old self. It was so breathtakingly delicious. Once they fully tasted it, they disappeared from the others as well. Damien and Jin reappeared in a dark void. It almost seemed like they were in the depths of space, with faint bright lights in the distance, giving the darkness a kind of dark blue tint to it. Damien stumbled to right himself. Once he realized what was happening, he tried to push Jin. He went right through his demon stowaway, and that was when he noticed the 2 of them were these spectral visages, ethereal and translucent. "What's going on?" Damien asked. "Is this some kind of illusion, chachi?" Jin seemed to stare in shock at the fact that there was nothing tying him to Damien anymore. Footsteps approaching them seemed to echo in the void. T. Robert, the tea master, approached them. He was not in a ghostly form like them. Instead, he walked to them with a gentle smile on his face, and hands behind his back. Both of the 2 proceeded to hear him in their minds. It was not as if he spoke their language to them, but just that he implanted thoughts in their heads like so. "What a nasty little Chajin. So disruptive and so violent. I never would have thought I would have come across another in this country. Who are you? What are you doing to me? Jin screamed in distress at the man. They felt a chuckle reverberate through their minds. Fool, you know me. I am T. Robert. I am a tea master. By the time I was 29, I drove out every Chajin from my homeland. This is my signature, my exorcism Chachi. I am going to wipe you completely out of existence. Jin collapsed onto his knees. Tears welled in his eyes. Damien looked on in abject shock, seeing the wrathful tea demon brought to such a pitiful state. You can't do this to me! He screamed. Damien watched as Jin wailed and wiped tears from his eyes. He flailed and flung his fists against the ground like a toddler throwing a tantrum. He gasped for breath for a few moments, and then raised his eyes up. In life, I was on track to be just like you. I was a tea prodigy. I took on masters who quickly had to stop teaching me because I excelled past them. I was on track to be the greatest Kung Fu Cha practitioner there ever was. It was my life's one true goal. My own village was afraid of how powerful I was, so much so that they cast me out. Then, I was struck ill with a violent illness, an illness that your era and modern medicine could have rendered trivial. Jin seemed to sniff and still heave. T. Robert stood, hands behind his back, seemingly unmoved by this story. I was just bored at the wrong time. For reasons beyond my control, my life would be cut short before I could achieve my dream. Before I died, I put my heart and soul into one last brew, infusing my essence into clay that would one day carry my spirit and my will. My will was so strong that I was given a second chance at my dream. You can't take that away from me! T. Robert stood unmoved by him. He just slowly shook his head. You are nothing but an evil spirit, a tarnished reflection of a memory. You have no right to trespass among the living. Farewell, Jin. T. Robert raised his arms in what felt like a flash. Suddenly, a shining blue chachi formed like a long blade in his hand. He went to strike down the tea demon. He slashed with unflinching and unmerciful fury. However, as he did so, his eyes widened. After slashing, Jin still remained, not because of any lack of power behind the swing, but because the power of premonition chachi gave Damien the split-second reaction to throw himself in between the blade and his demon. Damien heaved. A gash cutting all the way down his chest to his leg was visible in his ghostly form. Fortunately for him, though, the exorcism chachi was meant to kill a demon, and was unable to mortally wound his spirit. My child, what on earth do you think you are doing? T. Robert asked. Sorry, master, Damien said, breathing heavily. I don't mean to question someone as powerful and wise as yourself, but this exorcism of yours, well, I think it sounds a bit more like murder to me than an exorcism. T. Robert tilted his head. Child, you do not understand. This thing is riddled with evil and malice. It is the very essence of a disgruntled spirit who failed to accept death. It is not alive. It cannot provide anything good to anyone. Well, I disagree. I think Jin has provided good things to me. He helped me pass into the tea dojo. He points out my defects, sure, but that criticism from within, it makes me a better practitioner of Gong Fu Cha, and a better person. I think I can do the same for him. Don't pity me, you worthless Laowai, Jin said. I'd rather accept death than a helping hand from an inferior being like you. T. Robert noted Jin's hostile reaction to this. He seemed to stop and pause for a moment. Very well. The dark blue world before them seemed to rearrange, and suddenly Damien and T. Robert were at a table before one another. The table was filled with various teas and teaware to pick from. It almost reminded Damien of the exam brewing portion. T. Robert laid his hands out before him. You and I shall engage in Gong Fu Cha to decide the fate of this Chajin, he said. Though, beware, I will hold nothing back, and if you are destroyed in the process, that is something you chose for yourself. You are free to back out and let me finish my exorcism. Damien looked through the various teaware and tea. He read the labels on the bag. He smiled, grabbing one of them. Wow, Jin, check this out. This is a guifei from the year that I was born. Jin scoffed. That's nothing. There are teas that have been aging decades longer than that silly concubine tea. Stop. I hate when it's called that. It's my favorite kind of tea. That's what guifei means, you stupid Laowai. You can't just hide behind words you pretend not to know. Are you sure that's the one you want to stake our lives on? I think so. Damien looked at the table. What? What is it that you're searching for? I'm looking for a spoon, Damien said. I think I figured out what he did earlier. He jostled the oolong leaves in such a way that they fully opened up on the first brew. That's how he got that vibrant flavor right away. Jin growled. You're not going to brew tea with a spoon. He did that just to mock me. If you're so intent on knocking the leaves around in the water, why don't you just remove the lid of the gaiwan and dip it in there to circulate them? Damien pointed to Jin. That's it. That's exactly what I'll do. I am mocking you. You are a fool. Damien picked his gaiwan and picked his tea and grabbed the kettle. Okay, Master T. Robert. I'm ready when you are. T. Robert broke into a smile that he seemed unable to hold back. You would really challenge me to save his life and possibly give up your own in the process? Tell me, child, what is it that drives you to do this? Damien shrugged. Well, you might think I'm foolish, but I relate to Jin's goals. I want to be the very best at tea as well. I know it's probably a completely unattainable goal, but I want to see how far I can get with it. I'll never get anywhere if I just give up. I have to take on every challenge that comes my way, no matter how daunting. T. Robert kept smiling. The table, the wares, and the tea all disappeared before the two of them. Damien looked confused. You have passed my test, child. I wanted to measure your fortitude and your commitment to your cause of reforming this demon. Be warned, though. The demon who sows self-doubt in you is a double-edged sword. You can grow stronger and cut through challenges with it. Or it can consume you and destroy you, and even destroy the lives of those who are around you. Can you promise me you will never let it spiral out of control? Damien nodded. I promise, Master. Jin stood behind him with his arms folded. He seemed to scowl in anger, but something in him kept him from making sharp remarks. Damien bowed before T. Robert. T. Robert snapped his fingers. Suddenly, they were back in the real world. Damien looked around. He felt normal again, and that Jin had returned into his soul. It was clear that time had passed here in a similar way, but slower than it had for those in the world of T. Robert's Chachi. Rick had been released from the spirit cage and was talking with Jack and Bruno when they re-emerged. Bruno ran over to T. Robert, but the master seemingly ignored him and went back to his bag to dig through more things. He handed something to Bruno. Bruno jumped back in shock. T. Robert, are you sure? He asked him. I had no idea you had even brought this with you. The older master nodded. Bruno turned around and walked over to Rick. On behalf of my master, I would like to bestow this gift upon the Tea Dojo. You have proven to be great stewards of the culture, history, and skill of Gongfu Cha in the Western world. For your work, T. Robert would like you to have this. He handed a wrapped pu'er cake over to Rick. Everyone craned their neck to try to figure out what it was. When Jack managed to read it, he gasped. Rick seemed to take it as a cue, and trembled as he realized what he was holding in his hands. This is 7638? Bruno nodded. A cake from the very first commercial production run of Shopu'er. It has been in T. Robert's collection for some time now. He would like you to have it as a gesture of our appreciation for your study of tea. Rick bowed his head. Thank you so much. This is such an incredible gift. I could have never imagined anything like this. No problem, Bruno said. The future of the Tea Dojo is bright under your leadership, Rick. There are many shining stars. We look forward to seeing you all develop. Marcus ran up to Damien and playfully bumped him with his shoulder. He was curious to know everything that happened when the two of them disappeared. They finished up dinner and worked to repair the damage to the alehouse before leaving. They had one last day of events with T. Robert and Bruno, as they learned more about tea techniques and history. Then they saw them off, as they dropped them off at the airport. The whole group waved to the two men as they went in and got ready to get on their planes. Do you think the two of us will ever be as good as either of them? Marcus asked. We won't know unless we try. Abby and Jack walked over to the two of them. So, what are the two of you going to get up to now? Abby asked. The two roommates looked back at each other. They both smiled and then turned back to them. Damien said. I could go for some tea. What do you say, Marcus? Quick little brew off to settle once and for all who's best? Ha! Marcus laughed. You don't stand a chance. You're on. Thank you so much for listening to the Tea Dojo at Football State. This has been an absolutely incredible project to work on, despite the amount of time it's taken. I really hope you enjoyed this one. I've been very happy to combine my love of tea and writing in this story. As always, you can stay up to date with D-Squared Stories by following us on social media. That's kind of weird. Why is there so much more runtime? Epilogue. The Tea Dojo was silent in the late hours of the night. The moon shone through the windows of the Chanayu room. The stillness was broken by some footsteps, and then the turning of a knob. A figure slowly entered the room. He went over to a bookshelf and pulled one of the books out. He then slid it into a different location. The bookshelf then shimmered with chachi. The mysterious figure then brewed a cup of tea and drank it, pushing their chachi into the bookshelf and managing to move it aside. He entered the room. The shelves of this hidden room were lined with rare teapots, some ancient master-made with the finest Yixing clay. There were various rare teas from collections of wealthy and powerful figures in the broader tea community. The man rested the cake of 7638 in a central location in the room. It seemed to have a holder, already perfectly sized to house it there. Rick let out a sigh. We are so close, Yards. Everything I've ever wanted is just one pace out of my reach now. Yards appeared behind Rick. Then it seems all you need to do is continue stepping forward. So it seems, Rick said. The closet seemed to radiate with chachi, in the same way the moonlight reflected off the glass. Rick paused for a moment, taking everything in. Marcus and Damien will return in T-Dojo at Football State, Volume 2.